I like
Seeds. I gardened for years without ever growing anything from seed. And then I discovered sweet peas. And sweet peas were my gateway plant into starting things from seed because you really can't buy sweet pea plants started. I've seen them in a couple of nurseries, but it's not something you find often. And that's usually because they have a very small window for when they want to be outside. They don't sit around well in pots. It's not something that is really practical for a lot of nurseries and garden centers to carry. So often, if you want to grow sweet peas, you have to grow from seed. And that was where it all started for me. And now, I've got all of these seeds and many, many more. So today I want to talk about my favorite things to grow from seed. These are my must grow varieties, as well as some new things that I'm trying this year because part of the fun of growing things from seed is trying new things. Very small amount of commitment involved in that, at least financially, a little bit of emotional commitment, and certainly some time commitment. But if things don't go well when you're starting with a packet of seeds, I mean, you're not out that much money, right? So there are always new things that I'm trying each year, so I will also talk about those. I will put names of everything on the screen for you, along with when I start this. And this is based on what I used for my last frost date, which is May 10th. I'm here in now zone 6A. May 10th is actually my 90% frost free date. I've been using that for many years. It's been a pretty good mark for me. So that's the date that I use. So I'm going to put the actual date that I start my seeds on. You should look up your last frost date and then you can adjust accordingly. But I thought at least this would give you some idea of the time of year that I'm starting these, or I should say the time of this part of the year that I'm starting these, versus just giving you the rough range of how many weeks before you plant them outside. Of course, all that information is always on the back of the seed packet, so you can always find it there as well as looking it up at any number of sources online. First one I'm going to start with is snapdragons. I love these because, especially here in my sort of northern garden where we don't get too hot, they basically grow for me all year. I do get a little bit of a lull in August, but these will grow for me all year. Now, the great thing about these is they can go out early. They're quite cold tolerant, and they also go late in the year. My very favorite is Madame Butterfly Bronze or bronze and white. I actually prefer the bronze over the bronze and white. But it's a favorite. I think I'll grow it all the time. It's that beautiful kind of peachy apricot salmony blend, and I don't need anything else. So I do grow some other varieties sometimes, but my must grow is always Madame Butterfly Bronze. Next up is Foxglove. I generally grow Dalmatian Peach. It's the one I go to a lot. I do play around with other ones. I also have like Rusty Foxglove in here, which is really pretty. I find Dalmatian Peach to be very easy to grow. The nice thing with Dalmatian Peach is that if you start it early enough, you will get flowers the same year. Foxglove are typically biennials, so a lot of times you won't get flowers till the next year. Dalmatian Peach, which is an F1 hybrid, will often flower for you late the first year. Next up is Nicotiana, which, is right up there with my very favorite annuals, in particular my favorite annuals to grow from seed. I grow a whole bunch of varieties of Nicotiana, but my favorites are always in this chartreuse family. I do love that color in my garden, which you probably know. So I have three in that color range that I particularly love. The first is Nicotiana Alata Lime Green. That one is like maybe 30 to 34 inches tall. Very typical star-shaped Nicotiana like flower with really pretty chartreuse flower on it. The next one that's tallish is Nicotiana Langsdorffii. Slightly more difficult to grow, although not hard. But this has little sort of trumpet-shaped, almost bells. Super intense chartreuse color on that. Again, about the same height as that Alata, probably 30 to 34 inches, I would say. And then I also like the Perfume series of Nicotiana. Now, these are hybrids. So this is Perfume, and then they have many different colors. I like the lime color in this one. There's also an antique lime, which has a little bit of pink in it. I don't care for that. It's a little bit washed out. But the lime color is not quite as good as you get in Nicotiana Alata Lime Green or in Langsdorffii, but it is more like 20 inches tall, which makes it a little bit easier to work into the front of a border. That 34-inch tall is kind of tall for the front of the border, so I actually work with both of those in concert. Now, Nicotianas will mix and mingle around, and they do reseed pretty well. So if you let some of the reseeders pop up, you might get some very interesting colors. That perfume series has white, which I grow on occasion too. They also have purple, bright rose. I think there's a red in there. I've grown the purple and the bright rose. There's also one called blue, which is not really blue, that I have not grown. They're all really good performers, and they do have some perfume to them, as the name would suggest, which the Alata and the Dorfii do not have that really pretty scented smell of a Nicotiana. So those are my absolute must grows, but I also like one called Hot Chocolate. There's another one called Bronze Queen. I honestly don't see a big difference between the two of those. So I grow one or the other, which is slightly nodding flowers and smaller than the flowers that you'll get on Alata or on that perfume series, but that star shaped in a really dark color, kind of a dark burgundy color. Very pretty. I go back and forth on marigolds and whether I like them or not. Some years I grow them, some years I don't. But I do usually grow signet marigolds, which are tiny little flowers on very feathery foliage. I think these guys get mature size is 8 inches high. I've actually seen them definitely more like 14 inches high. They create a nice big mound. The thing I like about them most is that the whole plant is very scented and not like a obtrusive marigold scent. It's a very citrusy scent. I usually grow this one, Tangerine Gem, which is my favorite of those. This does have some of the same abilities in that other marigolds have in terms of pest control in your garden. It's a good, fairly good plant partner for some other things in terms of controlling some pests. So signet marigolds are almost always on my list. They're very good to plunk in. They're bright. They're super bright, and they're very good to plunk in throughout the garden. I don't always grow the fancier marigolds. Sometimes I do, but not on my must-grow list. Ageratum, also on my must-grow list. I like this one because since I rely so much on chartreuse in my garden, I find that that blue is a really nice foil for that. I also think they're absolutely gorgeous in bouquets. And since I don't want a little short plant, you got to be very careful with ageratums what height you get. So I like a plant that's a little bit taller, and I usually grow Dondo Blue is one of my favorites. And Dondo Blue is, I want to say Dondo Blue is maybe like 18 to 20 inches tall. It's got some stem length on it, so it does work really well for bouquets, as well as that mix and mingle thing in the garden. So I did mention sweet peas, and I love every sweet pea. I love every single one of them. I can't go wrong with any of them, and I have a lot of them. In fact, this year I did not allow myself to buy any new ones because I had so many left from previous years. I also saved quite a few of my own sweet pea seeds last year. I planted a mix of them by the back door last year, and it was specific varieties, but I planted probably 6 varieties in that area, and the mix itself was so beautiful. So I just saved random seeds from that. So I'll call that the backdoor mix or something. I am partial to blue ones. So Erewhon is a really nice one that I like. Erewhon is pink and blue. It's sort of a bicolor. Oban Bay is a very silvery light blue that I quite like. Blue Shift is one that actually has a little bit of orange in it. And Mr. P is a flaked one, so it's got it's purple with white streaks in it, or white with purple streaks. I think it's purple with white streaks. So those have a little bit more texture to them, but I grow them generally all together. In terms of brighter color ones, getting away from that blue-purple palette, Prince of Orange is a fabulous kind of intense salmony orange color. That's sort of a must grow for me. And Black Knight is a very, very dark one, kind of burgundy dark one. But like I said, I don't think you can go wrong with any sweet pea because they're all beautiful. Some do have more scent than others. The Spencer varieties sometimes have less scent, but bigger flowers and longer stems. Even those have scent to them. So I think you can go with what you like. I do love Cosmos, and although they tend to grow pretty well if you direct sow them, I do start all these inside too. A couple of my favorites are Apricot Lemonade. I like the Sonata, which is a very pretty, well, it's exactly what it sounds like, Apricot Lemonade. I also like the Sonata series, which is short, kind of bigger flowers and shorter, maybe 20-inch plants, which is nice in some areas. And then I also like one called Rubenza, which is a really nice kind of dark burgundy to fades to almost like a deep pink kind of thing with a lot of shades in between. The color changes quite a bit on this. It's a very pretty, nice color, so I often grow those. Certainly right up at the top of my must grow list are nasturtiums. I love nasturtiums. Nasturtiums are incredibly easy to grow. This is one that in many cases I will just pop seeds into the ground. If I have a hole in the garden, I'll just pop some nasturtium seeds in there and they'll be off and on their way. Nice big seeds, so great for kids if you want to get some kids involved in it because they can actually hold them with their hands and they will get one seed in the pot instead of if you hand a kid a pack of Nicotiana, you're going to have 1,000 seeds in one pot. Nasturtiums have come a long way. They used to be basically a mix of colors. Some of them were really rangy and very trailing and would really take over an area. I tend to buy the ones that stay a little bit more compact. I don't often want the trailing ones unless I'm putting them in a window box or something like that. There are several of newer ones that are called baby orange, baby rose. There might be a couple other babies. Those have smaller leaves and the plant itself stays a little bit smaller, so I quite like those. I particularly like another one called Vesuvius, which is kind of a deeper orange. It's not a straight orange. It's kind of deeper, a little bit rustier. That was a really pretty one with dark foliage. But honestly, I just keep buying all the new ones. There's a whole bunch of new ones out there, and I just like to try them because they're so easy to grow and so useful. I plant nasturtiums in the corner of almost every vegetable garden bed. They're a very good partner plant for a lot of things. Not only do they bring in pollinators, they also help keep some bugs away. So those work really well for that. And like I said, I put them in any place I have a little hole in the garden or a pot I need to fill. They're just so easy to grow that I like having them on hand because I can always use them somewhere for something. In fact, I have so many of them, and this isn't even all of them, that I can't actually close this little case. A few years ago, I planted some Nigella, and I planted Nigella primarily for the seed heads because the seed heads on it are beautiful. And if you plant Nigella once, it will stick around. It reseeds readily. I have it over in the vegetable garden. I put it in the cut flower beds and it pops up. In fact, there's some popping up right now. And it also pops up in the gravel below it. So I actually don't even have to start any of it usually because there's plenty there. There are several great varieties though. One that I quite like is Persian Violet Nigella, which is, this one's from Renee's Seeds, which is blue and purples. They're all beautiful. Just know that they'll reseed for you, but they're gorgeous. And I think they're even better actually when they're in their seed head form. A Delphinium chinensis. Now, people always think when you say Delphinium, you're thinking of this upright spike. The one that I really love is called Cheer Blue. It's basically a mound of truly blue, intensely blue flowers. It does flag in the heat. It will not grow all summer for me, but it does grow very well in the beginning of the year, and sometimes I get it again towards the end. It does reseed a little bit in my garden, so that's just kind of a little bonus for me. But it is, if you're looking for true blue, this is the truest blue flower that I think I grow. Okay, zinnias. Zinnias are another one. If you don't feel like messing around with dahlias, grow zinnias. They're equally interesting and beautiful. And there are so many amazing varieties. They are taller than you think, though. So keep in mind that many of these varieties of zinnias are, they're going to be up here. They're tall stems on these. So account for that when you're figuring out where you would like to plant them. I have started these directly in the ground pretty successfully, but they do need sun. So you got to have a spot where they'll see it, but they grow quite well there. When it comes to zinnias, I love this Queenie Lime series. So there are several colors in this Queenie Lime. And this is, and by the way, sometimes they're called Queen, but I believe the correct name is Queenie. There's always a confusion with the name somewhere. So I like almost any of those in that series. Now this year I'm growing Queen Lime Blotch, which is a new one for me. It's pretty much lime. It's very much like Benari's Giant Lime, which is the true classic lime zinnia. If you want just plain lime, just go for Benari's Giant Lime. I also have Lime Orange, Queenie Lime Orange, which I'm a huge fan of. Last year I grew Queenie Lemon Peach. Was not anything super special to me. Didn't think it was quite as good as the other ones. And then I did pick up some of the seeds from the Floret flower sale. I really needed that precious metals collection, so I did get that one. Have I told you before that I love growing annual vines from seed? I do. I try new ones every year. The best thing about annual vines from seed is that they grow so quickly, and for the price of a small packet of seeds, you get huge plants by summer. So I'm just kind of working my way through all of them, trying to find different ones and experiment with them. And I do have some favorites that I don't necessarily grow every year because I always like to try new ones. One of my favorites absolutely is Purple Hyacinth Bean. Ruby Moon is the variety that I grow. Beautiful flowers on it, olive green to purple foliage, and then the seed pods on it after the flowers go are bright, bright purple. So equally as beautiful as the flowers themselves are the seed pods. A very easy to grow, it's a bean, vine that will grow very quickly. So I think these are particularly good to grow if you've planted a new rose or a new clematis, but it's not going to put on a ton of growth the first year. Plant some annual vines with it, and they will fill up that space for the year, and then you pull them out of there, and when your perennial vines are going, you're good to go on that. I've also grown Thunbergia, Acerina. Last year I tried to grow a shell vine, or sometimes it's called corkscrew vine. That was a big fail for me. It did not even think about getting close to flowering. Maybe my season is too cool or too short here. I did start it ahead of time early. It was not a winner for me at all. Of course, purple bell vine is right up there. I think you guys know that I love purple bell vine. And that is one vine that I have grown every single year since the first time I grew it. Now, side note here, for whatever reason, I find that plant to be difficult to start from seed. In fact, I've got some out there right now. I decided to start them super early. They've been going for probably 2 weeks now, and there's no sign of anything happening. I always order plants of it. I order those from both of the seeds and the plants I order from Select Seeds. Select Seeds will send tiny little, like 3-inch pots of them, which I then pot up and grow inside. Because I want a backup and I don't want to be without that. It is my personal goal to crack the code on growing those from seeds so that I can offer some pointers to you, but it's a challenge. What you need to know about that one though, and many of these vines, is that they're from Mexico. So they just kind of sulk and sit around until it's hot enough for them to feel like they're in Mexico. And then I swear you can watch them grow about a foot a day. So don't be surprised if you're growing some of these annual vines and they seem very sluggish. They'll take off, and when they do go, they go quickly. Cup and saucer vine I've tried a couple of times. That's another one you have to start quite early inside in order to get flowers by the end of summer. I didn't love it. I found that there was a lot of waiting around for flowers to come. And I don't find the foliage particularly pretty on that one. So I'm a little off the cup and saucer vine thing now. I have not grown Love in a Puff yet. That's on the list to try. However, this year, in addition to the purple bell vine, I'm growing the hyacinth bean, Ruby Moon, always. And this year I am trying cypress vine. So cypress vine is kind of has a flower that is very Nicotiana-esque, and I have white, and I think I'm going to order the pink as well, or maybe I did, not sure. But you grow it as much for the foliage. The foliage is beautiful on this. This is one that I am looking forward to growing because I think that foliage is going to bring a really pretty texture. I'm also going to grow for the first time Spanish flag, which a lot of people say is an absolutely outstanding annual vine to grow. I haven't grown in the past because the colors on it are kind of reds and oranges, and that doesn't always work with where I might put a vine in my garden. So those are the two that I'm trying out for this year that are new. And I'm always continuing to try new annual vines. And I would encourage you to do that too if you've got a place where you could stick a couple of them, because it's quite fun to watch these things take off. Another plant I love to grow, this is all for cutting, honestly, is straw flower. Those, I particularly like the peachy color. There is sort of an apricot shades one. This year I bought king size salmon, which is supposed to be a little bit of a larger flower. I think these are really pretty tucked in because even these bigger ones won't be huge, but they're very nice tucked into, especially a bouquet with dahlias, because dahlias can be so huge they sort of lose all perspective in terms of size. So it's kind of nice to have small things tucked in there. Extremely easy to grow. New to me this year is Silene. So I'm growing Silene Carmine. Saw it last year in a garden I visited, fell head over heels. You know the story. Next thing you know, you got to do it. Really good for, I'm actually envisioning this with some stuff I'm going to plant in the urn in the middle of the garden. So I'm thinking this as container plants, probably rather than in the ground, but you never know. I'm also trying this year Santaliva percumbens creeping zinnia. Now, I have grown the Proven Winners version of this plant before, and I really love it as a cute little front of the border ground cover. So I thought I'd try the seed version of this to see if it blooms as well as the, probably semi-sterile or sterile version of the Proven Winners one, to see how it performs. Because sometimes with those annuals that I like to grow as sort of ground covers, I want a whole bunch of them. And so that's the kind of thing that I really like to grow from seed rather than having to go out and buy 15 of an annual, because, that adds up quickly. And then verbena. I'm a big fan of verbena. These are when I grow them from seed, these are the sort of taller ones. Now, everybody knows verbena bonariensis, which is, quite tall, 5 feet tall probably, and actually quite weedy in some areas. There are warmer zones where that can get weedy. I don't find that to be a problem at all in my garden. It reseeds very nicely if I want it to. Usually it's so slow that it actually takes a while for it to get going. However, I have had odd issues getting that started. And if I'm not mistaken, it's one of those ones that needs darkness to germinate. So I have given it that. If I'm wrong, I'll put a note on the screen here. I have given it that, but for whatever reason, that hasn't worked great for me. However, this variety called Vanity, which is an All-America Selections winner, has grown very well for me, and it has the added benefit of being shorter. I want to say maybe 3 feet tall, something like that. It's not quite the huge thing, but it still has that same look, kind of a drumstick, little flower on top of a skinny little stick, which I happen to love that look in the garden. I particularly love putting plants like that at the front of the border because it gives you something to kind of look through. So Vanity is a really good variety. And then I also love Verbena officinalis Bampton. Bampton is another one that I have found difficult to grow from seed, but the good news with Bampton is if you can just get 1 or 2 growing, you should be set for a long time unless you heavily mulch your beds, because Verbena Bampton is a very good reseeder for me. Unfortunately, I have very few good pictures of this because Verbena Bampton grows on these sort of very, very, very thin wiry stems into kind of a cloud. The flowers bloom at the ends and flowers just keep moving down. It's this kind of cloud of sort of lavendery, purpley kind of color. The stems are dark and the leaves on it are purple. Very highly dissected leaves on it. Beautiful, beautiful plant, and lovely to get that ethereal cloud-like feel, which I really like since I grow so many things like dahlias in the front border that are big-headed monsters. There's a lot of strong texture on those. I like to get that softer texture in there. So if you can get, my suggestion is, if you find a plant, if you want to grow that, absolutely give it a try from seed. Do not get discouraged if you only get a few going. And if you find a plant of it, just buy it. And then make sure you just let it sit in the garden. Maybe even clear some mulch away around it when it's going to be dropping its seed, because it should reseed pretty well for you. One of the things I really like about growing plants from seed is that you can grow them in quantity and plant them in quantity and not feel the least bit guilty about it. All right, let's talk vegetables quickly. Because, of course, when you think about growing plants from seed, usually we're thinking about vegetables. So I do that too. Tomatoes. I never used to grow my own tomatoes from seed, but since I started getting into these varieties that you just can't buy plants of, I do that. I will buy plants of tomatoes too if there's a variety that I am able to get, but I'm very into, as I've talked about before, the dwarf tomatoes that were created out of the Dwarf Tomato Project. Basically what they did was they took heirloom varieties and they crossed them with dwarf varieties to essentially create an heirloom type tomato on a small plant. And when I say a small plant, we're talking about 3 to 4 feet, which works really well for me because my raised beds are 21 inches off the ground. If I put a 6 foot or 8 foot tomato in there, it's a lot of gymnastics to get tomatoes off the top of that plant. So I really do love these dwarf tomatoes. I try new ones. There's great selections out there. I try new ones every year, but the 3 that I go back to all the time are Brandy Fred, which has Brandywine in it as one of its parents. Firebird Sweet, which is a beautiful kind of almost like mottled or stripy red and yellow tomato. And then Awesome, which is actually a yellow that has enough, it's not mealy yellow. Sometimes I find that yellow tomatoes can be a little bit mealy. This has sort of a texture and a feel and a little bit of a taste of a red tomato, very full bodied, but clearly a little bit less acid, really pretty. So those 3 are my 3 absolute go-to must grow tomatoes. I do like to grow cherry tomatoes quite a bit because you get them so early. So it's just nice to have something to eat because these bigger tomatoes do come later. So I do love an early growing cherry. I have been growing the one from Burpee called Sun Dipper. I quite like that one. Very good. And this year I am growing, I did order the seed, so I am going to grow the new GMO tomato meant for home gardeners. I think it's just called Purple Tomato. It's a whole thing. I'll put a link to it so you can read about it down below. The seeds were $20 for 10 of them. So I felt like I should do that to tell you guys about it and have some experience with it. So we're going to try that one this year too, as well as some new dwarfs. Also, I do tend to get some sample tomatoes from some companies. And so I'm always trying new ones of those too. So there's always some sort of random ones I wasn't planning on in there. I never used to grow peppers. Now I grow peppers. I love potapino jalapeno peppers because that plant is small. And honestly, it produces pretty quickly. I don't have a lot of heat for a pepper to do well. So those potapinos have always done well for me. So I grow those usually as sort of my hotter pepper. I don't need blow my doors off hot peppers. And then last year I grew aji rico, which were delicious kind of fruity tomatoes. I tried to make a salsa with them and failed miserably. I'm going to grow those again this year because there really are good pepper. I think I'm saying tomatoes. If I said tomatoes, I mean peppers. They really are a good pepper. I just don't know if I wasn't getting enough heat out of them, but I will grow aji ricos again because they were incredibly productive. Cucumbers, another must grow for me, and I have 2 varieties that I rely on primarily for this. The first is Chelsea Prize, which I always get from Renee's seeds. It's a thin English cucumber. The other one is Suyo Long, and that's a very long cucumber, very thin. I only like the thin ones. I don't like those cucumbers that get fat and have all the seeds in the middle. I want as close as I can get to a seedless cucumber. I've tried lots of varieties of kale, and I always come back to the Lacinato dinosaur kale. I think, let's see if I've got some in here that I can tell you the actual Black Magic. I love honey nut squash. So honey nuts I will grow. They're also a little bit more resistant to squash vine borers, which I dealt with last year for the very first time. So and grew honey nuts along with some other ones. And the other ones got squash vine borer and the honey nut didn't. So that was actually kind of a nice test, even though I lost some at least one squash vine last year. So honey nuts, small, really sweet butternut squashes, they save pretty well for me. You know, there's only 2 of us that we're feeding. So if I get a squash this big, that's perfect for one dinner. I am looking for a great zucchini variety. If you have a great zucchini variety, I've tried Fordham, I think is what it's called, which was supposed to be one of the best. It was okay. I also tried Incredible Escalator last year from Renee's Garden Seeds, which is the climbing zucchini, which would be perfect It did not produce well for me at all last year. Maybe it was just a bad year. I don't know. But I was disappointed because I would love to be able to grow that vertically. So if you have a zucchini suggestion, I'm here for it. For beans, I tend to like the green fillet type beans. So there's a couple varieties of those that I in particular like. One of them is called Maxabel. They're just those really skinny little beans are good. By the way, I only grow bush beans because I don't want to deal with going up. I don't feel like building a big structure, so I only grow bush beans. For yellows, Rock Door is a favorite. And then for regular beans, I mean, you can't go wrong with Blue Lake. I think that's kind of the classic. I just find myself not growing those as much anymore since I seem to steer more towards the fillet type bean. If I was only able to grow one vegetable, it would be lettuce. And it's because I think it's the best bang for your money, for your buck. Because think about how much lettuce costs in the store, and you can buy so many lettuce seeds for the cost of one head of lettuce. It also tastes so much better than what you get from the store. Some things you buy that you grow, like the squashes, they taste pretty much the same, I think. There's not a lot of difference there. But with lettuce, you can tell if it's homegrown lettuce or it's been or you bought it from the store. So lettuces are just a go-to for me. I love the Salanova lettuces. They're very expensive. And they are coated. They are, what is that? Coated seeds. What do we call that? You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, those. And I believe I've only found them at Johnny's is the only place I get that, but they're great and they're beautiful and they're delicious. And they're very easy to sow because what is it called? Because they're pelleted. They're pelleted seeds. So they're very easy to grow and not have to thin later. So you can direct sow those just fine. Although I do often start an early batch inside, move them out, and then I'll direct sow from there. But after the Salanovas, which I think are well worth the kind of expensive price, I love a cut and come again lettuce. And honestly, it doesn't matter to me. I think they're all good. Organic green salad bowl mix from Park Seeds is one that I've often used. And then I think there's one from Renee's. I'm not sure if I have it in here. Well, they have a baby leaf blend, which is fine. But I think there's also a Napa mix, which actually has some baby kale in it, which is kind of an interesting thing. So I will fill up multiple beds with lettuce. The only problem with that is you really have to time it right because nobody needs an entire bed of lettuce in 1 week. Then just a quick stop at herbs. I actually don't grow a lot of my herbs from seed. Things like thyme, rosemary, even oregano when I grow it. I will buy plants of those. They're very inexpensive. Our Master Gardeners group also has a plant sale where we sell some really cool varieties of different kinds of herbs. It's mostly an herb sale. So I will pick up those things from that sale usually. But basil I grow in mass and love it. And my very favorite type of basil to eat is Everleaf Emerald Towers. It has done incredibly well for me. It gets quite tall. It's not bred to be disease resistant like some of them are, but when I talked to the folks about that, and that was down at Ball Seed. I think it was originally a Burpee product. Because of its height, it tends to get a little bit more airflow, which is helps a lot to ward off disease. I've never had a disease issue with it. I also grow a Greek basil called Minette. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I do eat it. The leaves are very tiny. I mostly grow this as an ornamental because I like it. Kind of looks like a little mini boxwood ball in the garden, and I like the vegetable garden to look pretty. So I do grow some of that, and I will eat that in pesto. It's not, for me, worth picking it and chopping it all up. If you need basil, I'll just use the big guys for that. And then one last sort of oddball vegetable that I'm going to grow from seed this year, because I did it last year, is a leek. I got a package of a leek called Lincoln leeks. And apparently they're quite prized in some culinary circles because they're quite good to eat small. You can pick them out small and eat them, and they're very tender. I grew those last year, and I ate some small, and I left a lot of them in there. And they were delicious. I harvested many of them at the end of the year. They keep. I had no idea that leeks kept so well. So of course I grow a lot more vegetables than what I've talked about here. In those cases, like peas and Swiss chard and arugula, things like that, I like all those. I just don't have favorites that I'm really enthusiastic about. So I just try different varieties of those or just grow what I happen to have. So I grow lots more things than what I've talked about here. I just don't have go-to varieties for those. So those are all my favorites. Those are my go-tos. They're my tried and trues. I will always try something new to see if there's something better out there. But in the case of basically all the ones I just told you about, I always go back to these because they're just really, really good. They work really well in my garden and I love them. But I want to hear the varieties that you're really enthusiastic about. So please leave a comment. Let me know what your tried and trues are, the things that you must have. You have to grow this specific variety of whatever it is because it's just not summer without it. That's what I want to hear about. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking this video and subscribing if you haven't already. It helps the channel and makes me feel good. So thank you for that. Happy seed starting. We're going to get on with it real soon here. Have a great day in your garden.